Welcome back to another Ask Me Anything live from PerfBytes.
Yes,
And it's another day, another question. And if you didn't pay attention, we are not Tuesday or Wednesday. I don't remember when we were doing Tuesday or Wednesday.
we're early. We were going to
Yeah.
do it next Tuesday, but you're traveling next week
Yeah, I'm
or
traveling. That's why
something. Yeah.
I'm not even.
So
So first,
we just go Friday.
yeah,
Friday, ask us anything because it's Friday.
it is. It is. And again, we are so happy to be with you guys and to answer to any of your questions. So we are going to spend 1 hour with you. So if you have any questions related to performance engineering, or anything that will help you in your project, don't forget.
Monitoring,
Yeah,
observability,
network.
time series data. Yeah.
I would see. But yeah, use your favorite channel. So we are currently live streaming from LinkedIn, from Facebook, from YouTube, and from Twitch. So if you're listening to this on one of those channels, you can just drop your questions in your favorite channel, and we will get your question and we'll be able to answer that.
Yeah. You know what I really want to see in the restream? I want to see like audio only podcast, like so we could add Spreaker into Restream.
I wonder if they do that. They may have it, no? I guess because they have this RTSP plugin. So I guess you are able to forward.
We're gonna find out how to do that. That
Yeah.
would be good. All right. Arlene's with us.
Hi, Arlene.
Yes. Arlene's in our Discord channel. Hey, speaking of Discord channels, did you know that PerfBytes has a Discord server?
Yeah, well, of course I know that. Of course.
I think it's in our Twitter profile. You know, it's running around. So let me check. I think it's yeah, it's on the link. We have a link tree, which I don't know. There's a lot of different ones. That right, the top link is the Discord community. If you look for the PerfBytes Cafe, and there you go. You'll find lots of other stuff. PerfBytes Espanol. But that's where I had posted. So Arlene is very active there in the Discord piece.
Cool.
But,
Thank you, Arlene, for that.
Yeah.
So before we start and waiting for any questions, so Arlene, if you have any question, by the way, don't take the advantage and drop your questions. But
Yeah.
before we start anything, I think before we launched the stream, we were discussing with Mark, and I think we had a question.
We had a question about, well, actually, this is the first time, Henrik, that I get to pose a question to you on quote unquote, is it observable? So maybe this is like a ask Mr. Observability. Henrik Rex said this question to, is it observable? And the question, it's actually a meta question, I will say, which is there's things that are observable, like kind of out of the box. They sort of, you plug in your tool or your agent or something, and it already knows how to speak, let's say a specific log pattern for, standard Java apps, info, warning levels, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe you plug in on a Windows box, and it understands the basics of perfmon and starts pulling in metrics. So you got performance metrics for monitoring, you got some logging stuff, and then you're kind of tracing things back together with spans that really make things observable. But there's always things that are deeper. So we were talking about digging under the covers in a particular platform where you don't own the code. Like if you take an instrumentation framework and you're asked to make, my code running on top of a Java framework or a Spring framework or in a .NET world on some abstraction layer, you have access to the code and you know exactly what you're instrumenting and what either totally custom metrics you're publishing into a span, or my question is, like, you have control over that if you're in development. But if you're in operations, if you're, just like, what about these other critical metrics? Some of them are really esoteric. Like, one judgment I have of an observability tool is like, how hard is it to dig deep and find that weird little, if you've ever been on a support call with, say, Microsoft or Oracle or SAP, they're like, oh yeah, there's this one weird little metric. Oh, we don't publish it in perfmon. You have to get this thing out and then turn this switch, and then it starts publishing this number. And if that number ever goes over 2, then you're in trouble. Like, and you're like, okay, if this is such a critical number in some really weird esoteric edge case, but it's critical for my workload, what do you think about sort of maybe it's extensibility and observability together? Like, how do you grow what's observable? How do you know if you don't know? How do you go about learning and knowing those weird, deep things that you want to make observable?
So I think it's a good point, and I will take the example of let's say a proxy or HR proxy or Ingress or Nginx
Mm-hmm.
and so on. Uh, by default, they are not producing any metrics. They are
Mm-hmm.
producing the standard logs, and so which means if I want to be able to see what's going on those layers, I need to turn on. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
the exposing metrics. And I think this is probably the reason why they're not doing it by default is probably because they have done some tests. I mean, I suppose, and they discovered that there is an impact somehow on a small overwrite because aside of
There
that,
is.
the task you're basically exposing a new HTTP server, and there is a component that grabs some statistics and write that into HTTP server. So that's is not a big task for for a process, but at least it adds more overhead inside of that. So that's the primary reason is maybe few of those platforms don't turn on by default, and I think they were mainly doing it a couple of years back because at the end people didn't have that culture of observability, and I think now with a newer platform, I mean, uh, you have by default an exporter, a Prometheus exporter,
Yeah,
without asking anything. You have it by default. So I think with this culture moving on forward, I think we will be more and more have the options to observe in a better way our system. That's a great news from my perspective. And
yeah.
also, usually those solutions sometimes, once they expose Prometheus matrix, for example, they also provide a set of alerting rules for your Prometheus server, which is
That's
good.
true. Yeah,
Good because at least the vendor knows. It, I mean, it's supposed to know their own stack, so they provide which alerting should make sense. But to come to your question, usually what I do, I mean, that's my my logic that I use. I
yeah.
start with the default sets of data that you can get out of that solution, and then I start um, start to collect, and then see if I'm able to get the level of details that I need to be able to troubleshoot. So if I take, for example, an example of a proxy. So you have behind the proxy, you have several potential services or applications.
Right.
And if I just monitor this proxy and I have some problems, I would be interested to see, is it the proxy or is it a service behind the proxy that is causing that problem? Or you have a lot of errors. For example, the proxy is reporting a lot of errors. I would be interested is if to have, is it only the all the services that are behind that generate those errors, or just one service in particular? So
Right.
for that, I think this is the idea of having the right dimensions, and it happens usually, at least in the proxy world, that they are providing metrics which is very global, and
Mm-hmm.
you have those metrics you can graph. You're very happy of building those graphs, but because you don't have the dimensions to be able to split, for example, the number of errors per backend services, then you cannot understand. And I think there is always a source of data that all our systems is producing. It's logs,
Yeah.
and logs, with the advantage of logs, if you know the format of the logs that your system is producing, then you could be creative and build a log stream pipeline that will collect your logs, parse the logs, get the data that you need. And then with most of the logstream pipelines agents of the market, you have the ability to not push the logs to store it somewhere, take what you have extracted from the logs and expose new metrics. And then
Yeah.
it means that your log agent now is also Prometheus provider, exporter. So then, which means I'm collecting my logs from my proxy. I am parsing that logs where I get, for example, which services is involved, the response times, the errors, and then from there, I am recreating new metrics on the fly and exposing this, which means at the end, I have a data source that has more details, and then I can extend and be able to troubleshoot in the right direction. And that
Yeah.
I think from if you don't see the data that you need in the default solution that provides data for on this particular solution, check out the logs. I think that's my first reactions. If I don't have the metrics, then I will look at the logs, and logs will help me to produce metrics.
Yeah. I the thing that I wrote down, I'm writing down notes in my other thing over here. Uh, I wonder if my question is a little bit more esoteric than that because I'm an esoteric guy. The and I'm wondering if it's there. Like if Henrik, you're running something, we'll take your proxy server as an example, or a reverse proxy kind of thing, and it's more of a lateral flow of dependency. So you might look at metrics within the proxy, and then you're like, if is that directly observable of the thing that really matters to fix a problem, find a problem, etc. So I'm curious if one of the tenets of observability is it should be available for everyone to see, and it should be at the right level of granularity so that when things are happening potentially in real time, you don't ever end up in that situation where you're like, oh well, we weren't monitoring that, or oh, I have to reboot the system, which destroys its current state, to turn on more debug logging or something, right? As part of the idea is use up it's the return on investment, or the cost benefit of having that overhead of a trace or overhead of the extra logging for performance is so important. Don't turn it back off. Like, just run it on faster, more hardware, more instances. It's worth it to, if what's the point of having a car if it doesn't have a speedometer? Like, well, the speedometer makes the car slower. Okay, if that were the case, I'm still going to put a speedometer on my car. Or you could say catalytic converter. There's something else that's really important to make something observable by default. And so I'm wondering if there isn't something every performance analyst should know, which is, let's say you see high CPU on your proxy. You still have a question with good Socratic questioning. Why is the CPU high? And that leads you to go one level deeper and say, well, usually, which process is chewing up the CPU? Well, a process is a container. It could be in a container, but a process is just one level of abstraction. What's happening inside that process could be threads. Well, what kind of threads? What are they doing? You might have to take a dump, which dumps the memory so you can see what's happening on the threads because they're not observable by default. Well, that's very destructive to the workload. So we don't want to do that. So you go to the logs is great, but it's indirect. CPU is indirect, process is indirect, maybe even the thread was indirect because the thread's like, well, I'm chewing up CPU because of this weird looping state that I'm in. Well, why are you in that looping state? And we used to say peeling the layers of the onion. What I'm like, do I have an observability? Can I observe something directly? Or am I having to make inferences like, well, the CPU was high. Why? I don't know. CPU's high. And we throw hardware at the problem. Well, that's old school. Observability would be like, once you learn something after the defaults, hey, that little metric, once we got all the way down to say, hey, we're opening a connection and getting an unhandled exceptions getting swallowed, and then it's retrying a connection, and that's happening really fast because it's chewing CPU, or a thread is hung. There's tasks. So you could even go inside a thread and have, asynchronous tasks happening in real time. You could have a messaging system, but there's something happening directly. And am I observing the thing directly, or am I just inferring it from an indirect observability? And to me, that's the craft of, once I go off the defaults and I'm starting to learn and I'm digging deeper and I'm exposing things, there is a lot of logging that might be irrelevant, and I might only monitor that direct thing that's like, we need to look at this number all day long, trend it. What's the baseline over time? What's the variation? And look for Prometheus or any other platform. Yeah, you could publish that. I think don't just accept the defaults, but as you start using stuff, someone will come and say, "Hey, Henrik, what's happening? Oh, the memory is a little higher than usual." Okay, why? Okay,
I,
go
I
one level
think
deeper. Go one level. You keep going deeper and deeper and deeper.
I think I'm going to make a quote from Stain Shepherd. So
Yeah, yeah.
part of the PAC, and now he's another on another gig now. I remember he talked about in that was 2 years ago, 3 years. I don't remember. It was before the COVID for sure. He was thinking about observability, and he was saying he was referring to a story. He's saying,
hmm
I was in a zoo and I lost my kid,
This was
and
a neo. This was a pack presentation, wasn't it?
yeah, it was a packed presentation.
Yeah.
And he said that at that time he didn't pay attention on how he was dressed. So when the zookeeper came out and say, "Oh, how is your kid? Oh, he has green trousers. I don't remember, whatever, and a yellow shirt." And so then the parents, they were very stressed because they were looking for their kid. After a while, the zookeeper says, "Oh, we didn't find your kid, but we have another kid that is lost, but he has blue trousers and a white t-shirt." And then he went there and he said, "Oh shit, that's my kid." They said, "Yeah, but he didn't give the right description." And he said, "Yeah, so that's the thing. It's great to see things, but if you don't observe it properly, you're not able to give the right conclusion or the right information." And I think I will have a big shout to the performance engineering community here, because on the story that we were telling, if I mean I'm being dealing with a lot of proxy, so when I see CPU high or memory high consumed by a proxy, I have some assumptions behind
Yeah.
behind the scene,
Yeah.
because you know at the end of the day how it works, and you know that, oh, memory usage, probably there's a backend services that's slowing down, and that caused all the threads to basically be stuck in memory, and
Yep.
it's just summing up in the memory, and then boom, you have too much memory consumed.
Yeah.
But that is because we know the system. And because of
Yeah.
knowing that, we know where to pay attention. I think the problem is, either we have industry standards and we know we take those alerting rules and we rely on them, and that's great. But if we just rely on rules where you don't understand them, you go get an alert. Oh, I got an alert. And say, what is the problem? Um, there is Prometheus told me that there's a problem, so it's not my fault. It's Prometheus. No, so
hmm
but I think that's the thing. You, if you're dealing with a system, you need that to understand at least the various
Yeah.
layers, because to
Yeah.
at least be more efficient when you have to troubleshoot.
Yeah. It always makes me think of conscientious learning versus sort of passive exposure, and you learn through. Oh, I wasn't really paying attention, but I just got into the habit of doing it a certain way. I was never really conscious of it. Versus Staines. Well, first of all, he didn't lose his child. Just let's going to be really clear. I remember it was like, did you found your child? That's the most important thing. But I'm sure he caught heck for just like not remembering what his child was wearing. But it's also like active listening. So something we do a lot in technology, putting together requirements and do I have answers to questions? Well, I never asked the question because I wasn't paying attention. And so there's like, I used to give an active listening for performance workshop, which was a lot of role plays with someone being a PM or someone, reading through things. So that was like looking for cues or words that were indicators of throughput requirement, performance, number of users, all these things. Active listening for performance is like, well, I saw some stuff, but I wasn't really actively observing. And I like that. I think that's really good.
And at the end, just to summarize, in general, to be very, very quick to the conclusion, performance problems is always a queuing problem. Always
hmm
queuing in the memory, queuing in a thread pool, queuing whatever you want in the stack of your HTTP server. But then you have to
hmm
know how it's queued in that system to understand what you have to do.
Yep. There's always another question. Another thing for queuing is like, hey, I'm using a framework with generational memory management. So I have something that is this object is attached to another object, and that object is still stuck here. So I can't get rid of these other things because they're dependencies. And well, I want to get rid of these objects because they're old, but there's some weird anomaly in the code that says, well, even though I'm not using that object anymore, I'm doing my other thing. I didn't release it. I didn't disconnect and let that object die. Could be a data set, could be anything, right? So yeah, there's that. But to me, that's also, Henrik, like, people will ask, were these senior experienced kind of performance people, where should we put our knowledge of these things? And to me, it goes right back. I was thinking about having to go back to development and start instrumenting their code, which a lot of frameworks still require you to do if you want to do it well. There's still questions if you're a developer writing code. Well, should I expose this to be observable or not? The default answer should be yes, but then it's like, yeah, we really do have a lot of overhead, and it takes a lot of, how much time is spent in every process just putting out log messages or publishing stuff. So yeah, it's a good question. But I like the go study Socratic questioning and active observability. Conscientious observability, I think, would be the big
right
title
word.
I would give. Yeah.
I agree.
Cool.
So we had
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we have a small question. It's more. It's Leondan Elmaster, who asked recommendation on how to get started in the performance world. For this, I would naturally promote one thing that Alejandro has worked a lot, and it's pretty good piece because it's fun to read and you learn if you're pretty new in the industry. It's the hitchhiking guide to load testing projects. So I think that that's a good start. Unfortunately, to respond, and this is something we discussed over the years, in the IT world, there is no real courses for performance testing. And as you know, performance engineering is so many different skills. In fact, it will be very difficult to find the right course covering architecture concepts, communication concepts. There is statistics, analytics. There is a lot of things. So that's the problem.
But start somewhere, wouldn't you say, Henrik? Like, if your primary work task is, say, working with a testing tool, could be a neoload, could be even harder with open source, but maybe working with a particular manufacturer, a tool vendor, they probably have some training courses where you could even get training. So if you're working with a tool, try to see if there's training and certification, even if it's public, like Pluralsight or some of the other like external, like, hey, I really want to learn Microsoft SQL Server. Okay, great. And it's probably you learn about it and you get quote unquote certified in it, but it's not performance specific. And I think that, Henrik, I agree with you. It's not, you can't go get a PhD in performance engineering.
No, and even if the vendors, I remember Mercury did not have any. They were basically pure tooling training.
Yeah, just tools.
When I was working with Neotis, we were trying to at least to get one day part of the training days on the methodology, because we discovered at that time, a couple of years back, that a lot of people that were interested in learning about a tool like Neoload, for example, they were either had the expertise, so that's great, and either they were quite new, or people to say, "I'm been doing some automation, and now my mission is to do load testing," and they don't have the right background. So I think at least if even if it was minimal, it gives you the minimal understanding to survive. But again, from my side, I was coming from development and architecture, so I had that culture. But the best way of learning is suffering. Suffering is the best way of learning.
But it can give you Stockholm syndrome. So if you fall in love with the state, it's so weird to work in an office with heat. I'm so used to working in a data center, freezing my butt off. So, but yeah, I think outside of reading and studying that, I agree, Henrik. It can be a doing, but finding ways, like, we all still make our way, at least I still make our way. There's different people getting back out into events, and I even do them virtually, to do classes. And honest to God, send me the top 3 things you want to learn, and I'll just, maybe we create some content that is like mini workshops, like
And you can
little,
do a perf bits on this.
could do perf bits on it. Yeah, I could do a perf bits on the topic to introduce it. Those are fairly short, but I'm thinking you could do a half day kind of workshop, sort of 3 episodes of something like that. We've talked about some other ways of doing this, but yeah, it doesn't, and it's giving you the ideas, and then you have to start finding a way to practice it, which is why I say, hey, what are you working on right now for performance? Well, we're using Nginx and we're doing sort of proxy optimization, or we had a problem with something and now we're going through some rounds of load tests to try to figure out how to make sure X, Y, and Z. Whatever that thing is you're putting load on, whatever that protocol you want to learn, whatever thing you want to learn to improve monitoring or diagnosis of what's going on, that's where to start. So if I were to teach you a practice, Henrik, I would want you to go within a week and start, hey, I took that idea from Mark and I went and did it over there. And that's, to me, that's more vocational learning. And I have to say a side comment about certification. Certification's great. If what you need is a job and the job said you have to be certified, just go get the certification. Just do whatever you have to do. I'm certified. I'm done. I'm in. But learning, lifelong learning, is most successful people I've ever seen in technology are always tuned in, always asking questions. So um, I got tons of certifications over the years. In the last 30 years, went through all the. I was at Microsoft, did a bunch of the MCSE, MCSA stuff. I did SAP certifications. I did all the Mercury certifications. I got like 6 of those over the years. Certified this, third. And at some point, you're like, I'm so certified. I'm so tired of being certified. Like, there isn't a certification. There's no meta certification. The only people that have done that pretty well is sort of the in the infosec, the security world, where you get people that take all of these courses. It's kind of like that comes from the networking world. If you get your Cisco certifications and you like, wow, there's all of these things together. But that model is, we would need to build. There's no one vendor that was going to build that amazing certification. So it
This
takes a
is,
lot of work to do that. Yeah,
I
it's
think
a
that
very good.
that is something I wanted to when I was working in the performance industry. There was something I wanted to build, but I never had the time, I would say, and is to build a consortium. So bringing K6 or Grafana, bringing Tricentis, bringing Market Focus, bringing all those various vendors in the same organization and say, hey guys, we need, first of all, we need to make a standard, because similar to open temperature, what's going on here, we are relying, we're not building the solution that will store and stuff, we do just a standard. So
Yeah,
then it's easier people to transition or to learn, voice to learn tool A then tool B, or this particular KPI is named this way on that tool, and on this way it's named differently. So then it's just difficult for the community itself to be able to deliver on a day-to-day basis. And also, I
yeah,
think that would be great if those company comes together and say, if we want to make our solution successful in the market, of course we have to sell it. But again, keep in
yeah.
mind that if the tool is not used properly and it's just a disaster,
Oh yeah,
I'm a CFO and I say, so I purchased that tool 100K or whatever the price, and I don't get any results of that. It's a bad tool. And I think it's not the tool who was bad. It was
yeah.
probably the user who didn't do the right thing with the
Or
tool.
the implementation, or lack of training, or knowledge, or support of the community. And I think the observability ecosystem is doing more for performance in that way, and I think we kind of fall in line a bit in an agnostic way. But yeah, I agree, Henrik. That, and it doesn't matter. Let's say you're implementing databases. You're doing data analytics work. Well, there's a bunch of different ways you could do it. If you go to a different, I learn how to do, let's say I learned how to do time series databases, and I learned Mongo, or I learn an RDBMS, like a traditional Oracle or something. My job prospects are, I kind of have to do it the same way everywhere we go, because that, and I can get certified in that if I just, my career is, I'm an Oracle DBA and I go from Oracle to Oracle to Oracle to Oracle shop. And all of these other performance in particular, but like security as well, anything that goes across the platform, front to back, top to bottom, there's no one place to learn. You maybe that's, I'm going to make a note here. I'm going to make another note. Like if we just published a checklist that said, in your journey, front to back, top to bottom, how find yourself on the grid, and like a bingo, like performance learning bingo. And you like, yep, I did a project like this, did a project like this, and you could at least then reach out to vendors and say, hey, we don't even have courseware for this. Let's go put fill in the hole so you can at least get a little bit of learning. And then like, I got on a project where I actually tested that protocol or I actually tested that technology. So one place that we could learn from that, remember the periodic table of like DevOps? And
Yeah,
remember they had like all the different tools?
there was Xibia Labs. We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
It
a
was
great
great.
tool. Yeah, it was. Agree.
So you'd
At
be like,
least,
how many of the boxes, how many elements on the chart was I at least familiar with? And all of a sudden there was a whole area of the charts like, I've never used any of those tools. Okay, I should at least learn one of them over there. And that's the hard part. Like you can get certified and get a training class in one of the boxes. And if that's a very, very substantial box, like an Oracle or a very, very big like SAP, good Lord, you could spend your whole career just staying in that box. But that's why a lot of people ask, why aren't there more training classes, performance, or whatever? Because it goes all over the map.
you mentioned something SAP, and this is funny because I always been doing the various project, and when it comes to SAP, and SAP is different. You don't do like this. Why? Because we have SAP experts. Okay. And it's funny because for SAP, suddenly everything changed. The way of analyzing, the way of delivering, the way of, because I don't know, it's a completely different IT market or IT type of project. I mean, from
Yep.
my perspective, again, maybe I'm
Yep.
wrong, but this is was my feeling when I was involved
Like
in
totally
those
different
projects.
language and culture and norms of how to operate. And it could be, that's also a byproduct of very, very large projects with system integrators where be conforming around those practices in that way is actually very efficient. Like, we're not here to be a Swiss Army knife, like picking different tools and plugging them together the way we do in observability or in other parts of tooling. So yeah, that's funny. But plus you have to learn German.
that's another story. So we have Arlene. So Arlene said she has done some testing on video games and for personal dev project, and she's looking also to learn a bit more. But I think testing video games for me, I think it's first of all the depends on how the video games have been designed. But I think in the video games industry, years ago they were always been facing huge number of user connecting to be able to play live, and there
The
were a
real
lot
playing,
of
yeah,
constraints.
real time work, yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is the performance culture, I think, in the gaming industry is completely advanced. I think, I mean, this is my feeling, because they have
Yeah,
because they can, if the streaming service is not responding, then they are just throwing
right.
all the money investments in the floor, because the problem with the gaming industry is that people has huge expectations. If you don't are there when you have released your game,
Yeah.
then you're out.
Yeah, and there's two parts to that. Like one part is if you got into a manufacturer or a developer of a game and you were going to do performance work within that context. The functional work, you better love that game, because the functional testing is, the automation tools are totally different, and after your first 2 weeks on the job, you're like, I never want to play this game again. So you better not. It's better if you don't like video games to go do that work and just see it technically. Performance wise, the actual game itself is a lot of hardware compatibility testing from a
Yeah.
GPU perspective. And also, so many gaming rigs are completely custom built. unless you're going on a platform with the big players, with like a Sony or a Microsoft Xbox or Nintendo Switch kind of stuff. They're a very specific platform kind of thing. Those are like SAP. But other games that are more openly, hey, we support an open GPU standard for rendering. That's a polygons per second game. Learning that is really good from a hardware perspective, only because you really do learn core motherboard communication channels, parallel communication channels, the PCI bus. You learn CPU and memory in parallel between the main board and the GPUs, which have cores and multi different cores, right? If you're looking at, say, a Tesla, the NVIDIA CUDA core kind of stuff, or what that is. So it is a fantastic way from a client perspective for a single user, but it's not load testing in the same way. Like that's where you're saying, Henrik, like
Yeah, but
Xbox Live or some of those things are like, well, we're running a website and we're basically streaming real-time information about games between. We used to do it in the kitchen. You remember we used to have like
yeah.
gaming night and someone, oh, I've got a new network switch and now we have a more competitive game because the network's fast. Um, but
But
then, back then it was compared to a 56K modem trying to play online. So things
but
have changed a lot, even in the online world. Yeah.
but you know that I think in the gaming industry, and at least this is my feeling, is chaos engineering is super important, because if you
Yeah.
play online game, then you have to think about the case. Okay, so I'm my gamer is you're running on that program where there's a lot of things going on the game itself running, and suddenly there's a big
Yeah.
network latency, and the information is coming up. So then there will be an impact somehow on the experience of the user. So I think there is
Yeah.
a lot of things to test, and I think it's a pretty interesting market. I mean,
Yeah.
at least.
It's it could be interesting if you did. I mean, there's all sorts of different games. There's browser-based games, so you have to learn sort of web performance, browser front end analytics, rendering performance, and that kind of stuff. Again, I would kind of put them all in a big category of the single user aspect of performance optimization, which you're going into the code and bringing down into the resources to make the code more efficient. Things like how do you rebase the libraries so that it loads the most important and the most frequent, or the first thing to load is available in the code right as fast as possible, so you can optimize load times, you can optimize the DLL. So you're doing things in the code base for how it gets compiled and laid down as bits back in it's not as big a deal, but it still can make a huge difference if you have a frequently loaded library that's not cached. So you're looking at caching. It's really interesting analysis. But again, like if you went to get a PhD, that would be one of the 1,000 courses you have to take in your 25-year degree at Performance University. I'll give a shout out. I will say, our not, you and we know we're Dynatrace fans, but Dynatrace University, if you can get into the sort of Dynatrace University world, if you can get to that, there is some good sort of generic content. A lot of the content that's in there talks about, it's not, there's some that are just about the tools and how they work, but there's some other stuff that they use examples that you have to work through. And much like the OWASP stuff, you can even go download Easy Travel, which is the Dynatrace
Oh yeah.
testing app. Go grab Easy Travel and start working through some of the exercises and things, playing around with it.
And
It's like, yeah,
if you take that example of those, don't, if you do load testing or you want to learn about performance engineering, don't start with a JPEG store, please. It's too basic. Do something more complex. Do, because otherwise you will start to like it's like you're in a kindergarten and you're so happy saying, now I know performance engineer, and then you go out, get out of the world, and then you so realize that the people are dangerous and they're not nice to you anymore. So
yeah,
that's a good thing.
groovy.
And
All
Arlene,
right.
because Arlene was working in the indie video games, it would be very interesting to have her experience and what she has been doing, because that could be also something that we could share with the other listener. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think in video games, again, like we mentioned, is very very different from more a traditional web or corporate applications, I would say.
Yeah. So since Henrik, today is Friday, and I usually do perf bits, and I could just consider this today's perf bits. I think we're going to bless it right now. Today's you're on perf. This is Ask Me Anything, but we're just live perf bits, and we're 2 bits today. Not the we don't make a byte. We're just 2 bits.
2 bits.
Yeah. But I did have a question of the week. I was feeling quite ill last week, so I missed. Do you want? We could bring up the question of the week.
That would be great. I agree.
It was in. So this is something I post in Twitter, but it's in the Discord channel as well. The question of the week was: name the most effective tool in your performance workers toolbox. Is it the load generation tool? Is it graphing visualization? Is it a test planning tool? Is it data collection? Something else? And of course, Arlene's thing was like the team. It's like the team is a tool. And then let me share a couple of the other responses I got online from Twitter. Let me go back. I got to find it. But what do you think of that question? Do you have a favorite tool in your toolbox, Henrik?
It depends in which area you're currently working on, but I think first of all you need a robust solution that will help you to achieve your load. Okay, depending on your load, you have different various solutions that will help you to do so.
Yeah.
And also, I think what I used a lot in the past, and I was changing, was Excel. Because when you have to take some analytics from production, and then you have to build a precise workload model that reflect real life, then you have to go through the data. So Excel
Yeah.
was one of them, because I did some extractions, or sometimes it was in databases. But yeah, I think that's one of the biggest tool from a performance engineering.
Yeah.
And of course the and also anything that will help me to generate data sets. So there are other
Okay. Yeah.
tools that will there's a lot of vendors in the market, or there's that helps you to clone the database and extend it. So I think
Yeah.
that is a very important tool, because we need significant data to run a realistic load test.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that is something that I really like
I
as well.
like I like your point about Excel. Even though a lot of super tech geeks are like, "Why Excel's for muggles?" Uh, and the truth be told, you are collaborating with a lot of different people, and they have access to Excel. No pun intended. That's ironic I said that, but it's a tool that's pretty ubiquitous, at least in the professional work. So if you can get stuff into Excel and share it out, people can maintain it. You can actually collaborate now, fully within the tool, so you can alter data sets over time. And then there's a bunch of other like little utilities that can pull from an Excel spreadsheet of any kind, pull values out of it, automate it, put it on the pipeline kind of stuff. So I like that, the data management stuff.
I
There
had
are a couple.
There's another tool that I used a lot, and that was a couple of years back, when you don't have any observability solution, and you had to connect to each individual stack to collect the observability layer, the
Yeah.
metrics, the measurements
Yeah.
that the metrics exposing.
Yeah.
So you were doing it in various protocols to do that, and there was always a firewall involved somewhere. And
Oh yeah.
usually you don't have the rights to open firewalls or make that. So you rely on other teams. And there was a
Yep.
tool that was very small called Port Query.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Yeah.
and I love that tool because you people say it's done. Are you sure it's done? Let me test.
Yeah.
And that was just amazing. So then you were even able to make some scripts to a dashboard to test all the various firewall rules if they were open, to have some like a sanity check before running a test. That
Yep.
was something that I used heavily in the past for sure.
Speaking of that, one of our followers, Mark Dawson, on Twitter said the pound for pound champ of performance investigation tools is arguably Wireshark.
Hi, we have our friend Andy who's saying hi, so I'm going to say hey Andy.
Hi, Andy. Awesome. On Mr. Grabner. So Wireshark, and it's hard to
Wish.
argue with that one. It is a go-to tool when everyone's, I don't know what's going. I can't see. Right? It's not observable. Where is this traffic going? Is it encoded? How is it encoded? Is it encrypted? How is it encrypted? What port is it using? Much like Port Query. Yeah, you Wireshark was pretty good. That was from Mark Dawson contributed that. Our friend Nicole Vanderhoeven at K6 says, my note taking tool. How am I going to learn and retain everything that's changing otherwise? So some kind of a shared. Do you use a note taking tool?
I used to use Evernote,
Yeah,
because I'm not doing using it much these days, but I really like the fact that you can scan websites
yeah,
and then save it, and then you have that saved, and then you can read the entire website
yeah,
on your go, put some notes. So Evernote was one of my favorite tools for that, for sure.
yeah. I have to say, my whatever chat repo that I'm using with in any and I'm on all of them, right? So you all the way. I've been using those all the way back to Yahoo Messenger, Yahoo
Oh,
IM. Uh, but the chat history is my note taking tool. So when we move from Slack to Teams, like how long are we going to keep the Slack around? I don't know. I am exporting all of my chats. In fact, I may export the entire thing into a searchable database because there are answers in there that I've forgotten that I got, and so so my chat tool is my note taking tool, um, which is just crazy.
the,
Plus, it
the,
has screenshots and shit.
the other tools that I like in the performance engineering is especially because sometimes you run your some load test or some performance test, and then if you see that the problem is in your database, then either you are the DBA and then you hook it you directly you can look at the database, or you're not. And I was always frustrating when you discover, oh, shit, it's the database. All right, so let me call the
Yeah,
guy. Is he available? When can we do this? Blah blah blah. And that was just a problem. And I think there are a couple of tools out there that helps us a lot when you do that. So there is one for Oracle. That is a small tool, by the way, not very expensive, and doing an amazing job.
yeah.
It's DB. There's DB Martin. That's Scott.
DPA.
Uh, no, it's let me D-side software.
Yeah, yeah,
D-side
yeah. Yep.
software. So they basically, it's one of the biggest expert in Oracle who built that tool, and this tool is incredible. It
Yeah,
do live analysis, shows you the execution plan lively. It's do even a replay. You can replay an event and see what happens in the database. For me, it was the most efficient tool when it comes to Oracle,
yeah,
when you have to diagnose. And otherwise, there was our friend from Finland, the Mr. Devatem. So it's my
yeah,
Supermon. It was also
yep,
very efficient tool as well.
yeah, yeah. I've the DPA used to be called Ignite. I think SolarWinds has it now, Database Performance Analyzer, and there was a one from the late '90s that did the same kind of RDBMS analysis stuff and gives you AI kinds of early AI analysis of metrics and suggestions and query tuning and query hints, and it was really interesting stuff. So I agree with that. There are a couple more answers I'll share from online. One was for Intel's vTunes. Um, Intel vTune. Did you ever
Intel
use vTune?
No, never.
It's pretty cool. If like Arlene's point asking about gaming, if you're ever tuning application code on a client in a single user session and you need to do like rebasing and all sorts of stuff that's happening and you're just happen to you don't have to be, but if you really want to see it be powerful, you're on an Intel platform. You can go deeper and deeper and you just keep go deeping and it's like going quantum. If you're Ant-Man, is you're going to get really small, and vTune takes you all the way down. Heap fragmentation analysis, what the caches are doing on each chip. So you can look at like cache optimization, cache fragmentation. Really interesting stuff. vTune is, but it's again very specific to the vTune platform. Another one, Halvar was talking about a data collection, so a prod filer, right? Something profiler, something. But the last one I'll bring up is from Harinder Sira, who says a good collection of rock music. Crank up some Iron Maiden while you concentrate and debug performance issues. So I like that. And then Scott Moore, if you haven't seen Scott Moore's 2 minutes to load test,
Music
that's
is
pretty
pretty
funny.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I agree. And of course, we didn't mention, but performance engineering without having the right data doesn't make sense. So you need obviously an observability layer in place.
yeah,
So
yeah,
back in the old days, we, like I said before, we were doing everything, collecting our us we as a performance engineer to every single system, the metrics, and that was in fact that was painful, but that was
yeah,
also a great way of knowing every system on how they're producing metrics somehow. So that was
yeah,
great. But now, I think 95% of the project now relies on APM, or not
yeah.
APM, Observability platform, because you
Right.
have everything. And you have the metrics, the event, the logs, you have the tracing, and it gives you the right insights. But again, keep in mind that when you, and you know that because you deliver project, uh, don't pick a solution that will won't have the right granularity of the data. So if you have
Right.
one data point every minute or every 5 minutes, when you run your performance engineering test or whatever, you're fishing for really precise data. And if you
Yeah.
have a lot of aggregation, you lose track on what is currently happening on the system.
Yeah, and a good performance anomaly in that case is like very like spin latch kind of contention happening, which it's unproductive work because you're retrying things in a like sleep zero, really fast loop, um, and so, but you may not see it if your sampling rate is really really low. One of the things I'll say, and we got Mohan
And
asked,
Mohan,
and I'm going to ask again, Henrik, what was the SQL tool, your database tool you were talking
I'm
about?
gonna type it and show it to everyone.
Okay,
So I used it in
so,
several gigs,
yeah,
and
and then Mohan, the one I mentioned is now I think in SolarWinds. It used to be called Ignite, but it's called SolarWinds Database Performance
it's
Analyzer.
SolarWinds. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
remember this one.
yeah. There's again not a super expensive tool if you use it just in your testing. Yeah, decide like decide, but decide. Get it?
And the owner and the company is located clear next to my house. So if you need to visit
Yeah,
the company, we can enjoy a barbecue
we can
and
work it
whatever.
out. I would, as a total side, we have these great sponsors and folks that support Perf Bytes. There's so many fantastic tools. This was an esoteric question for me. I've used that word a lot today.
Yeah, that's true.
Obscure test. It was like the rock and roll music thing. It was like, hey, I need a note taking tool. It's all the little stuff. Some of the great solutions that we have, if you're in the Dynatrace world, boy, you get a lot of this stuff in one tool. Like there's a Wireshark, there's a PCAP that works alongside the Dynatrace One
You,
agent. So
you can
you're
do
not
threat
just on your
dumping
own
easily.
using Wireshark. Yeah, you. So in a lot of these great supporting companies that support Perfbytes and other companies, yeah, once you get a list of these together, you're like, wow, I'd like to have all this put into one tool. Go check out what Tricentis is doing. Go check out uh, what we're seeing. Catchpoint APM, Dynatrace, we talk about a lot, most just because we're fans. But yeah, check out a lot of the tool vendors that are supporting us.
Yeah, and
K6 has some cool
did
stuff,
you
which is fun.
realize that I have Dynatrace close to my heart here? Is it?
Look at that, ha! No bias. We full disclosure. We love, but that's just it. There are things I will have nits about Dynatrace as well. It's like, guys, how come you don't go deeper in this area? Like the door's wide open, but there's marketing. I'm not a PM. It's fine. Yeah. So Andy shared a nice answer there, and Mohan, I think the other tools. Go look at the Twitter feed, Mohan. There were some listed in the Twitter feed, the responses to that question. Um, but yeah, that was cool. What was Leodon's other question here? These guys are talking about Prometheus, right?
Yeah, it's just this because we didn't mention any observability solution. So you said, do we have to? Can we consider Prometheus or in
Do you?
any
What?
observability solution of the
What
market. Like I said,
do you? What do you think?
I think, of course, it's a very important platform that you need to
Yeah,
utilize today. But again, keep in mind I won't use a tool where the granularity of the data is like 1 minute or 5 minutes, because
yeah,
again, it doesn't make sense. I use few well-known APM solutions for some POC, I would say, and
yeah,
yeah, I was very pretty much frustrated to see that I have
yeah,
one data point every 5 minutes, and then you have this big spike in your load testing tool,
yeah.
and you say, "All right, let's dig it in," and then you see, okay, full flat, nothing.
Just to make one point of clarification, because I've used I used to do a bunch of work in the IBM, you know, Unix world for IBM or DB2 kind of work. Then I was a Microsoft, so Microsoft used to have MOM and the operations manager monitoring solutions. Perfmont's always been in there, and you can change its sample rates. There is a difference as somebody, because we've sort of abstracted the time series source, like on the K6 thing that the guys were doing, Nicole and the guys were just before this. They had a time series database. I think it was Influx, and of course they're ingesting real time data. So there's no aggregation potentially happening on the incoming ingestion, much like you would even dump a raw data into Cassandra. You can even do it into Splunk. You do it in Dynatrace. There's a difference between the sampling rate, meaning the ingestion rate, and aggregation for visualization. So
Yes,
there's two different things there. Like what you're pointing out, Henrik, just to share the note really in depth. You want to have very high, as high as you can without really disrupting
the
overhead.
sampling, yeah.
2 seconds, 1 second. If you can get a 1 second sampling rate, that gets you pretty good. And if you can have almost a live streaming of the metrics coming in ingestion, you want to have a high sampling rate. But if you're doing, say, a 98th quantile aggregation every 10 seconds over, something that's running at 1,500 transactions per second with a full data series, that crunching, when you're refreshing your visualization, that can be aggregated and maybe refresh only 10 or 15 seconds. But it's the raw data, the ingestion sampling rate, the actual ingestion, you want to have that really, really high. So just some people are like, the screen is only refreshing every 10 seconds. But I'm looking at raw data, no aggregation that is sampled, down to the element. And logging, to your point,
I think
if you're logging every little thing, you have 100% data represented. There's no real sampling involved.
so. I would recommend for those who never looked at it is the various speaking sessions that has been delivered in the Performance Advisory Council done by
Yep.
Neotis in the past. There was a couple of tracks presented by Stephen Towson, and
Yeah.
also a track from Stain Shepard, because they are basically were I was making joke with them at that time, saying that they were raw data fanatics, because they were they were collecting all the data coming from load testing, storing it in huge analytics
Yeah.
platform, and then they were
Yep.
doing some amazing dashboards. And the fact that when you have all the raw data, and this is you can look at their presentation, you can see the outliner, because the problem is that
Oh,
if you
yeah.
just keep on the stuff, it's good, you basically you satisfy most of your users, but there
You'll
are
miss.
outliners, and those
Yeah.
outliners, they will be the one that will send some bad tweets and destroy your brand reputations, because you did never consider those guys. So
Yeah. Yeah.
don't forget about the outliners.
Yeah. 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 You kind of have to become a performance thinker about your performance tool. If you're like, do I need all of these dashboards to have 100% raw data all the time? Like every little component, every little time query that I have running in real time. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, I need a monstrous machine with really fast storage and a lot of memory in order to do this work. For me personally, I do stuff with Grafana and Influx for probably 6 or 7 years now, and I've pushed it on little VMs. I all of a sudden I'm like, I'm beefing as I do more. I beef up my, but any time series data, that's just so people are aware that the ingestion rate, or it can be completely raw, or it could be sampled or aggregated. The other aggregation. What's the other thing? Is
One thing just to add about that,
aggregation is a sin, or
if you use time series database, it's great solutions, but more data you ingest, more memory it will basically take on the system.
yeah,
So make sure to keep an eye on this, because you need that data to make your report or your decision. So if you don't keep track on how much memory it consumes, then you could be surprised and say, "Hey, I thought that we had some observability and we don't have it anymore. What's happening?"
yeah. Go
So
we turn that off because it was too hard to pull all the data in real time. It happens in test. When you're in test and you're sort of focusing in to prove or disprove a particular code logic or something, and you can kind of narrow things down, that's okay. But in production, where you're kind of needing to keep everything in play, that's where having raw data is really, really great. You might not look at it. You might look at it in an aggregated way, but yeah, that's
I
exactly
think
right.
we don't look at it. We use smart systems to look at it and recognize
Yeah.
pattern for us, because again, dashboards are, I think this is what all the initiative that has happened over the years with the captain, and now with
Mhm.
Dynatrace Cloud Automation. But the fact that you have the quality gate and everything, you rely on a system that will help you to collect and make decisions for you. Again, if there is huge problems, we will troubleshoot and look at it in details. But if we have at least something that give you, you're good to go. Don't worry,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
can trust that. That is more than efficient and helpful for all your teams, for sure.
Yeah.
I
Right,
think
man.
we are almost at the top of the hour, so I
We
think
are.
it's time to conclude, I think, today.
Yes, we need to give our thank yous out to Tricentis, Catchpoint APM, Ryan Folk Consulting, um, and wait, who else am I?
We have a new
Abstracta, our
we
friends
have
at
a
Abstracta,
new
and
sponsor.
a new sponsor just because he likes us, Scott Moore of Scott Moore Consulting. You've seen him on the Perf Tour, you've seen him in the pack, you've seen him in the SMC Journal, which I thought I didn't get that it was Scott Moore Consulting Journal.
Yeah, it took
I
me
thought it was like some other tool, like other company. It was like the SMC Journal, Software Management and Configuration Journal. Yeah.
no, and also he's I mean, I love the all the effort that he makes to make those songs. Iron Maiden was wonderful, and The
Yes.
Cure is just amazing. So big applause for Scott for that, for sure.
He's having a bang up time. Yeah. So thank you. Well, that's good. He's basically buying us. We're all going to go get barbecue now. Travel and keep things going. But you should see some stuff. I was on speaking of that, I was on with Scott, the SMC Journal. We were talking, we actually talked about you, Henrik, and the Neotis getting acquired by Tricentis. So there's some, yeah. So
I will have
we
to
made
listen.
up a bunch of stuff in our heads about what that means for the industry, blah blah blah.
I will have to listen to that then. I will take this weekend. I will listen to it for sure.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So thanks you all for spending the time with us. Thanks, Andy, to connect. Next time we'll bring you in the show, so that will be fun to discuss with you for sure. And thanks, same thing, Mohan. If you want to be with us, that will be fun also to discuss, to interact. So so stay tuned.
Oh,
We do
yeah.
one.
Wait a minute.
What?
Mohan just dropped a bomb in the chat about performance puzzlers. Oh, they might come back. Who knows? That we did one as a hot day at it was, and it
No, I
didn't go
remember.
very
I
well.
went there. I was there.
Yeah, it
You
didn't
were
go
with
very well
Brian. You were.
with
We were.
Brian, and
Yeah.
people. It wasn't Dynatrace specific, so it kind of got canned. But I think the people that liked it really liked it.
I really liked it. I just came up because I wanted to meet you at that time, because we always exchange
Yeah,
online. And I went
yeah,
there, and it was fun. It was fun, to be honest.
it's fun. I think it shouldn't have been like a hot day training. It should have just been like a
Uh,
fun after
Activities.
hours thing.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because people get frustrated, and you have a few drinks, and then you collaborate a little better. Maybe it's fun.
Yeah.
So who knows, Mohan? We'll fit. Events wise, Henrik, you're traveling next week. Do you have an events coming up that are on your new news channel? The
So
observability news? No,
so the open source news.
open
So that
source news. Yeah.
is going to be every second week. So basically, every week you will have some news from my end. So there will be one
Yeah.
from is observable on next Thursday, and there
Yep.
will second Thursday will be the open source news. So by the way, if you have any news about any framework that makes sense to share, please reach out to me so then I can talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm fishing for news, so that will be
Yeah.
very relevant.
Are you going to be anywhere in real life
I would
coming
be
up in the
in
next couple months?
Austria. I will
In
visit
Austria, great.
the my colleagues. Unfortunately, I won't be able to see Andy.
Yeah,
I'm going to spend the weekend crying. To be honest,
that's
but
fine. Cool. I in the end of April, I think I'll still be going to Star East. I'm doing a performance training class there. It's an introduction to performance load and stress testing kind of stuff. It's a really, really fun class. It doesn't have any puzzlers. Well, maybe I'll throw a puzzler in there. Who knows? Um, but we're doing a panel discussion. Leandro's going to be there. Our friends at Abstracta are going to be there. Lots of folks there. And then the following week after that, I'll be down in DC at InflectorCon, STPCon. And Leandro and I are toying around with this idea of performance-driven development. It's come up in different ways. Andy mentioned it on another thing recently in Twitter, so it's becoming interestingly popular versus just having performance as an epic that everyone ignores. Maybe you have such importance around scalability or something. You have performance-driven development. So yeah, who knows that?
I,
But
w-
yeah, check. I'll be out in the world
I will be
giving classes like old days.
I will be in KubeCon for those who's in the Kubernetes community. I will be in KubeCon in May for KubeCon Europe. So we
Cool.
could. It will be. It's going to be weird. I've never been in a conference since 2 years now, so it's going to be
I know.
weird to see so many people.
It's strange. Hey, and speaking of which, we need to get some more of PerfByte swag. So we'll take some of Scott Moore's contribution to support PerfBytes. We'll get some stickers and some swag, so we can have that. So you can give stuff away. Maybe we need some in other languages too, because we didn't have like PerfBytes Espanol stickers exactly. So maybe
Yep.
maybe we need some more swag.
Yep. And by the way, we have Leandro that is connecting just to say bye. So that's perfect. So
What?
let's say hi and bye.
Hi, Leandro
Hey,
amigo.
how are you?
He's
Oh,
on mute.
he's on mute.
There he is.
We don't
We
hear
can't
you.
hear.
We don't hear you.
That's right. Let's just pretend he said something. Hi,
Yeah.
my name is Leandro, and I'm an incredibly intelligent person, but I have a green wall behind me for some reason, and I.
Hola, me llamo Leandro. ¿Dónde está la biblioteca?
Oh, Mark, did you do the voice of Leandro? You do very well, Leandro. I'm impressed.
Stop mocking me.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Hey, Leandro,
Getting
are
off
you
of
going? Are you
meetings,
going?
happy to be
Are you
here.
going to help me convert away from JMeter to K6 and some fancy Grafana stuff that I saw today on the live stream?
I won't convert you, but I will show you the greatness of K6 so that you add it to your tool belt. You don't have
That
to be
sounds.
converted.
That sounds good. So I don't have. It's not like a religious faith conversion. I don't have to go through classes and then take like an oath with a anointment of something or anything like
Then you.
that.
I did a joke the other day. You would feel like Britney wanting to drink Coke when you are under the Pepsi contract. No. Here you can drink whatever you want.
Whatever Kool-Aid you want. It's actually really impressive. And Henrik just pointed out. So we were just wrapping up the show, but he pointed out some interesting Dynatrace and some interesting things that K6 can do. So I'm going to jump on it, I think, and we're going to, if we jump in, do it. So
Some more talks and
I'm ping some questions,
integrations.
and actually a shout out to the Grafana K6 Grafana Slack channel. There's so much information out there. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, lots of activity. In all honesty, I can barely keep up with so much that is going on there. There's so much.
Yeah.
And but stay tuned, Leandro. You'll probably be interviewed by me for a K6 dedicated episode. I will share a few plugins that K6 has come out to, where I'm a big fan of. So it will be great to share.
The
But it's
pressure.
nice to see you, amigo.
Oh yeah, I tried my best. I just jumped in as soon as I could, but next time I'll try to be full time. I don't know,
Cool.
but we'll see in person soon. That's another one, right, Mark?
Yeah,
We'll have some
exactly. Star
surprises.
West for sure. I
Mhm.
Star East. Sorry, Star East.
There's
Yeah, I have
something
to get
coming soon.
some star something.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
for sure.
All right.
Lots
Groovy.
of surprises.
All right. So
All right.
I think it's
So
time to wrap up.
the chat it can't stop because Andy's just starting to put other stuff on here.
Yeah, I know.
RDD.
Resiliency driven development.
That's a good
I
conversation
will
I
come up
had.
to observe. No, that's already the case with OpenTelemetry. So it's observability development, driven development.
Okay. What can
Or
we
tracing.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, never. All right. So I think it's time to wrap up. It's
Is
Friday.
it really? Are you sure?
It's
We've
Friday
only tried
evening,
for like 10 minutes now.
and I need a beer, and I'm sweating as we speak. So I need to.
He's going into withdrawal. So it's been a long week, Henrik. So thank you, Henrik. This is really good. It's great. I'm glad we did it.
All right. Me too. I enjoyed, and I hope you enjoyed as well. And see you in 1 month for the next
Thank you,
Ask Me
everybody.
Anything.
Enjoy this long
Ciao.
conversation.
All right.
Adios.
See you. Bye.